but I started to become really hyper aware of like my surroundings. I just literally couldn't get out of bed. I'd never had anything like it. I think it was about 13 14 months from first struggling to having a conversation with someone. Yeah, I mean, this is such a good question. I think, firstly,
Hi, George. Welcome to the Never Fully Heard podcast. Thank you for coming on.
hey Nick, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to see you. The term mental health is used a lot, and there's been some amazing campaigns around it, and I feel like everyone has a different experience with it, depending on their mindset, their friendship group, their upbringing, just so many different factors. And where I want to start is, when did you first understand what mental health even was?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think it's such a big part of my journey, and I work in the mental health space now, so I've probably used the phrase mental health, billions of times over the last few years. But what is interesting is the first time I think the first time I can remember even being aware of my own mental health was when I was about 21, 22. So I don't know if I'd used the words mental health before that. I don't remember a time doing it, but I definitely don't remember ever being aware of my own mental health or the fact that I even had it, which, it just sounds ludicrous to say that now, but really for 21, 22 years of my life, which is a long time, I I didn't know that I had mental health. I knew I had physical health. We get, had physical education lessons at uni. I was very aware of physical health. I did a lot of extracurricular physical stuff like cricket and athletics. So I understood that world. I didn't understand mental health. And for me, when I was younger, I thought mental health meant mental health issues. I thought they were synonymous. I thought it was the same thing. So I think that's why I was never aware of my own mental health, because I, you know, I didn't feel like I had issues. I didn't want to be associated with that either. So if I heard the words mental health, I automatically assumed, I had those kind of those sort of bad stereotypes. I'm almost ashamed to say now, but I just thought of people in straitjackets and like mental asylums. Those are the images that were conjured for me. It was only when, around 21, I started suffering with my own mental health, and I had to go on a journey of like learning what was going on. So, I mean, for a year, while I was struggling, I still never used the words mental health. My way of talking about it was, I feel a bit weird. I don't feel quite right. That was the only language I had. It took about a year, but probably even a little bit longer, to finally get to the point where I was like, right, I'm having mental health issues. So that was a whole thing, and then I had to go through that, you know, therapy and all kinds of other stuff, recover, get better, then start to learn, oh, okay, actually, mental health issues and mental health are separate, and I have mental health, and what does that look like? There's a good side to it. So it's been a big kind of journey of like self discovery and learning, and probably only recently, probably only in the last couple of years. I'm 29 now, so probably, getting on to my late 20s, that I really feel like I understand mental health now, my own mental health. I'm sure there's, things I don't know and things I still need to learn, but it just, I mean, it just seems ludicrous to me that, you know I'm almost 30, and or late 20s, and I've only really just understood what mental health is.
Thank you for sharing all that, George. I mean, there's a lot in there that I want to really unpack. I guess where I want to go back to is, having gone through all that, what were your first signs that you were starting to suffer with poor mental health?
Yeah, God, this is going back into memory banks now. I think I mean, it's definitely a hazy time, but I think I just started to feel. I think that my earliest signs, I started to feel a bit kind of. It's a bit like out of body in a way. Like I was at uni at the time, so say on nights out, rather than the nights out I'd previously had before, where I was just having fun, enjoying myself, and being in the moment. Really, I think I started to become what now I know is anxiety, but I started to become really hyper aware of like my surroundings and the night I was having, and feeling uncomfortable and feeling a bit out of place there and starting to worrying, or was worrying about the way that the night was going to go. So I started to be less in the moment, and yeah, I mean, I know now it was anxiety, so I was in a real kind of anxious state. Um, and then I think that sort of turned into like depression as well. And those signs were I'd have days where I just couldn't get out of bed. I just literally
Mm.
couldn't get out of bed. I never had anything like it. I just stayed in bed all day. I was in bed till like the late afternoon, early evening. I just felt low. I just felt really, really low. And yeah, it was like tough. They were tough things to deal with because I was like, again, I didn't know I didn't know I was suffering from mental health issues. I didn't know I had a problem. I didn't have the language to describe this stuff. So it's really confusing because I was just like, I'm at university, the best years of your life, quote unquote, and I'm just like, I keep getting these states where I'm worrying or I'm feeling really low. So I think that was the earliest signs. Obviously, other kind of symptoms developed, but I think those are the earliest memories I have really.
It sounds like there was almost quite a lot of frustration with yourself in the beginning of the journey.
Oh God, so much frustration. I just that 100 billion% made my journey worse because I was just really harsh on myself, really harsh on myself for a long, long time. There was it started with frustration. I think frustration of what are these little moments I keep having, which I'm sure will pass. And I think as it didn't pass, that frustration turned into anger. Why am I like this? What's wrong with me? I should be stronger than this. I'm a man. All that kind of self-defeating crap. And then I think as that didn't as it didn't get any better, that anger turned into more like kind of hopelessness really. Um, so I went through a lot of emotions like that, a lot of kind of negative self talk, a lot of defeatist self talk really.
Was this all going on inside your head, or was anyone else aware of these like thoughts of you were? It sounds like you were really harsh to yourself, and was this all just going on inside your head without any help from the outside?
Yeah, for a long time this was just in my head, which you know when I got better, it was probably the thing I regretted most about my journey is not opening up sooner. I
Mm.
don't regret it anymore. I know it's all part of the journey, and everyone's journey looks different, and part of the reason I am where I am today is because of how my journey looked. But I took a long, long time to open up to anyone. I think it was about 14 months from first struggling to having a conversation with someone, which again, it just feels ludicrous that for over a year I wasn't in a good place and I didn't feel able to talk to anyone. I think at the beginning I didn't have the language to talk about it. I didn't know I needed to talk about it. I thought it would pass. As I think it became clear that there was something going on, I then didn't feel I could talk about it because I didn't know how people were going to judge me. I thought I was going to be judged really negatively. I thought people was going to think I was weird, have these sort of like um, misconceptions of how I should quote unquote be as a man.
Mm.
I had to be a certain way. So yeah, it took a long, long time. And I'm not saying when I opened up and had that first conversation, everything was fixed because it wasn't. But it did get easier. It genuinely, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Still, still in a difficult place. I still had a lot of work to do. I felt it get easier, and I had awkward conversations with people and difficult conversations with people, and I had ups and downs. But I know I felt better when I told certain people. I felt like I didn't get judged because I think and that's one of the really difficult things with some mental health issues. Something like depression, for example, you feel it makes you feel worthless, and it makes you feel like people don't want you around. So I think actually starting to have these conversations, and then people just wanting to do nothing but help me and support me, and you realize that people do care about you. It just
Mm.
takes away that power a little bit that mental health issues have over you. But yeah, no, for a long time I was fighting this battle in my own head, which yeah, I know it. I just know it made my journey worse and longer than it needed to be.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing it. It just really points to one of the reasons why I wanted to start the podcast. Is there's so many people in general, but like there is a lot of men who are just battling these emotions in their head, and it's definitely not an. I mean, as you've just alluded to, it's not an easy journey once you open up, but it really is so much. It's just so much easier when you've got other people to chat to that you trust, and whether that is your friend or whether it's a therapist for helping deal with some of the more serious thoughts and elements of it, to a professional who's trained to be able to hold the space for you. It's just so important to open up. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. um
Yeah, and I think also important to add, like, I don't think it necessarily gets any easier, like, ever. Like,
mm,
I've been through all of that, been through a couple of rounds of therapy. I've work in the mental health space, and I'm very familiar with my own mental health, and you know the outside, like other people's mental health. I still find it hard to have conversations when I'm not doing as well as I could be. Like,
yeah.
I still feel my hands go a bit clammy and my heart beat faster when I feel like I need to tell someone that I'm not doing as well as I can. I think humans often have this, like, they put pressure on themselves for things to be better than they should be, or they feel they should be a certain way. So I think that's important to say as well, that it doesn't, at least for me, it hasn't necessarily got any easier. The only thing I've learned is that the first time I thought I was going to be judged in a certain way and I was going to be like outcast. Now I know that people are really supportive and want to listen. So although it still can still feel hard opening up, and it can still feel awkward and messy and sticky, and I lose my words a little bit, I know that generally the outcome is a good one. So I think that's been the big learning for me.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I mean, I agree. I think even when you were talking through the example about being hyper aware on a night out, that happened to me recently, just because I was in a like an anxious state, and it is yeah, my I still haven't spoken to anyone about it, 'cause I thought, oh, it's just kind of like irrelevant if you do have those moments. Just kind of get on with it, even though I'm doing this, and even though it happens with everything, even at work, you can know something and then you can do the exact opposite, just because sometimes the brain is extremely irrational. So yeah, there's your brain's
Yeah,
always going to
yeah,
play tricks on you.
yeah. Literally, 100%. But I think what I've another thing I've learned is that any like your body is actually like a really good. It's like really good at giving you information. It's like the best source of information that we have about ourselves. So I think whenever I feel some of this stuff, like, 'cause obviously, I still get anxious about stuff, or I still, basically, you feel things in your body really first before you know it anywhere else, so you can even rationally think about it. So I think I've just tried to become really, really aware of what is going on in my body, which is what I wasn't at uni. I was ignoring it, I was pushing it to the side. I kept telling myself it would get better. It was just nothing. Oh, I'm probably just tired. All of this kind of stuff. Whereas now I just pay attention to what's going on. Doesn't I don't always have to go through this big, long, deep introspection. But let's say I'm on a night out and I start to feel a certain way. I just get a bit curious about it. I don't try and judge it, but I'm like, okay, interesting. What's this trying to tell
Mm,
me? Is it maybe time to go home? Do I really need that extra drink? Is that what's going on? So I think I've just become really aware of that, and you can do this both good and bad. Pay attention to good not kind of bad emotions, but pay attention to all emotions. Ones that maybe are more favourable, or maybe ones that are less favourable, because it's all just information, that our body's trying to tell us about where we're at, and our well-being. I just think we haven't been taught to do this, so we just kind of, with these things we feel sometimes, we just ignore, often to the detriment of our lives,
mm.
really.
And that sounds like you've learned to judge yourself less. Is that fair to say? It sounds like that's kind of removing the initial harsh critic from acknowledging some of the feelings.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I think that's been probably one of the most beneficial things in my journey with my own mental health, if not the most beneficial thing, because I think I've had to go through a lot of, it's like a lot of learning and unlearning, and then time and patience and habit building. But I think we're sort of taught that there are good and bad emotions, as I sort of like tried to allude to. We're sort of taught that happiness is good and you should always be happy, and then sadness and stress and all the rest of it is bad and you should avoid those things. Whereas actually, what I've learned and what I've been taught is there's not emotions aren't really good or bad. They just are. Obviously, some are. We wish we could be happy all the time. No one wants to be sad. Well, I don't think so anyway. But actually, these things are they're just ways of giving us information. They're just normal, natural emotions that our body goes through, and they're ways of giving us emotion. So if we get angry, we get sad. What's that telling us? What thing do we need to pay attention to? So I've tried to kind of ingrain that into myself, which I've tried to then carry through with anything I'm feeling. So if I'm feeling anxious, rather previously I would have been like, oh, what's wrong with you? Like, you should be stronger than this. Why are you worrying about this? All this stuff. Now I try to be a bit more like, okay, this is interesting. Like, what's going on here? Why is it coming up? What do I need to pay attention to? I try just to ask myself the questions like that. It's not always easy. Like, it's really not always. Again, it's not always easy, especially when if it's something that perhaps really triggered you, or something's really upset you, or you're really anxious, really, really emotive. It's hard to step back and be like, what's going on here. Sometimes you need to just feel the feelings and probably get angry about it and maybe have a bit of judgment. Then I think it's important to be able to put it to one side and look at the situation rationally and be like, okay, what is this telling me? But yeah, it's really not easy. I went through therapy again recently for about 6 months to work on. There's a couple of specific things I wanted to work on in my life, and for me they were quite difficult, personal, emotive things. It was tough. Like, probably the main thing we went through in that the 6 months of therapy was getting me okay with these things in my life and what they were trying to tell me. For a long time, I just didn't want to be okay with it. I was like, no, I'm not happy with this. I need to be rid of it. It's holding me back. The therapist spent a long time trying to tell me that once I get comfortable with them and see what they're trying to tell me and work with them, that's when you can work through these things and often move past them. And I think once I got to that place, these things haven't been a problem in my life anymore. But I was beating myself up about it for a long time at first. So yeah, it's that kind of like less judgment. I try and practice that as often as I can, but again, it's not always easy, and I don't have all the answers figured out.
Yeah, these are some really powerful practices, and I can really tell you've done the work, because having that self-awareness is, I mean, you can really tell when someone has been through therapy and they are self-aware, or even if they're just a naturally self-aware person, and the difference between that and someone who's totally like, it's almost like hard to see someone that just can't understand their effect on others. And I think if you haven't been through an element of trauma, sometimes you're not aware of the impact you can have on people around you. But one thing I was wanted to go back to was the self-awareness piece, and the fact that it seems like you've learned to pick up on kind of like the patterns in your life, the negative patterns or the negative thinking patterns. Is that like just purely thought, or are there any other practices you use to become aware of those patterns?
I think the main thing I start with now is my body. So being aware of what's going on in my body, which for anyone I guess that's not used to this, it can sound a bit like spiritual and a bit mystic, because I was definitely in that place. I was like, I don't want to start paying attention to these things in my body, but basically someone taught me, and it was really useful, that we feel things in our body before we kind of have even formed thoughts about them. And I've now noticed that, like, if I'm anxious about a situation, I'm normally feeling it first before I've even thought about it. Maybe my hands are clammy. Maybe I've got a pit in my stomach. Might have a bit of a headache, something like that. So I try and just get really, really conscious of what's going on in my body. And obviously, we all do this to a degree. Like, we all know when we're a bit hungry and we're like, I need to eat, or when we're a bit thirsty. And I think it's trying to go beyond that and just really paying attention to anything that's going on. And then it's just paying attention to the thought patterns. And what I've really had to try and work on, which is an ongoing battle, and I think something I'll be doing for the rest of my life, really, is being aware of the thoughts without getting sucked into them too much. I'm quite a deep thinker and quite analytical, so I often overanalyze the thoughts and try and think around them or think of alternatives, and I end up getting into this kind of like vortex of thought, which again I was working on this with my therapist. It's about trying to pay attention to the thoughts, not judging them, not trying to change them, not trying to think of an alternative, just paying attention to what they are and then working with them as they are. The analogy I heard once is if it's like a kind of boat going down the rapids, if the boat's the thought, rather than you being in the boat, it's about being on the shore watching it go past, which isn't, again, it's not always easy. But it's, yeah, it comes back to this piece around just watching, being aware of what's going on without trying to get too sucked into it and judging it and, yeah, beating yourself up really.
Yeah, that's so good. And for the people that haven't been to therapy, I know you brought up a few times, and I still think there's going to be so many people, so many men who are thinking, like, even just like positively, like, so glad you went to therapy, but I don't need to do it. I can figure it out without it. Or, and but they just keep running up against these challenges in life, and they are really dealing with low mental health, and or even just having consistently, like, I know some people won't even like the phrase, but just like consistently having a really crappy time and unable to deal with their emotions in relationships and all these things that can rear their heads. What would you say the main benefits you've seen from going to therapy are? And what would you say to someone that's reluctant to go?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is such a good question. I think, firstly, people put therapy on this, it's like put on this pedestal in so much as it's seen as like this big, mystical, difficult space you only go to if things are really bad. And it really, the way I just try and break it down really simply to anyone is it's just like going, you know, not just like, but it's more or less like going to see any sort of coach, like let's say sports coach. Like if you were an athlete and you wanted to become a better runner, but maybe you weren't hitting your full potential, say, or there was something wrong with your running, or you weren't quite getting your technique right, you're probably not going to just keep trying to do the same things that you've always been doing on your own. Like you'll probably go and get a coach, or maybe you'll watch videos from a coach on YouTube. Basically, you'll go to someone else to give you an outside perspective, to show you the different things you're doing wrong with your running, the different techniques. Have you tried thinking about doing this instead? Build up different practices, all to help you become the runner you're meant to be. You have it within yourself to be that runner, but sometimes you need an outside perspective from someone who's been there and done it before to just show you things that you can't see in yourself, because you might have your own bias. There might be a certain way you've always learned to run and you think that's the right way and you won't see any other way because you don't want to, but someone else can help you see that. That's just how I see therapy. It's I just really break it down to, it's just someone who is helping you become the person that you want to be and are meant to be by just pointing things out to you, showing things that maybe you aren't aware of, blind spots, maybe teaching you a few practices and tools to kind of take with you outside of the sessions. Yeah, obviously, like, you know, some of it is tough. A lot of therapy can be tough. You can go into some difficult things. It's not always easy. Um, that's all, like, that's what I see it as really. It's just like another form of coach or teacher or mentor. Um, and it can be life changing. And it was for me. Like, you know, again, I say this as someone that's, I've been through a couple of rounds of therapy. I've had a couple of coaches through work. I've been in the mental health space for almost 5 years, probably a bit longer actually. So I'm fairly kind of aware of, you know, different tools and practices and ways of being. And yet the course of therapy I had earlier this year was still life changing for me. There was things I wasn't aware of, blind spots I had that I didn't know were there, that I was shown. And that short course was life changing for me, I'd say. So I think that's really the main thing I'd say to anyone, that it doesn't need to be made into this big scary thing. It's just, if there's something going on in your life, whatever it is, good or bad, that you feel is maybe getting in the way or holding you back, it's just having a conversation, like with a coach or a mentor or a teacher. Obviously, I've sort of downplayed it a little bit there. It's obviously a bit different, but I think you get the analogy.
Mm. I I'm so glad that last bit of therapy was life changing for you. Like I know, in my own life how much that's made an impact. I was just thinking, having just. I'm going to go back to sports analogy, but I've just sprained my ankle and I've been given these physio exercises. And it's like, if your objective is to get better at sport, right? Get better at tennis, you've got to go through the physio exercises. Because if your brain isn't like working at full capacity, then you're not just going to be able um, to do what you want to do, whether that's have like the best relationship possible or like the most fulfilling time at work. If you want to succeed at work, you can't be having this haze that can come on, as you mentioned, with depression and anxiety. You just you'll burn out so fast because you're having to overthink about everything anyway, and then having to operate at work. But also, someone said this the other day, and it was, if you have a deeper relationship if you have a really deep chat with someone, you feel more connected with them. So if you're not working on your mental health, you're not working on your mental state, then you're robbing people close to you or better relationships with you, because you may be pushing them away. You may have not dealt with some of that trauma. You may not be able to fully speak through your emotions. So it's just like the ultimate personal development is having a better mental state and a better mental well-being, for you and everyone around you, because whether you think it or not, you impact everyone. You impact everyone around you, positively or negatively, depending on the mood and the way you carry yourself. So yeah, so important.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really good point actually. I think something I've sort of learned over the last couple of years is mental health isn't just about what is going on in between our own two ears. It's not just about what's happening in our own brain, which I always thought it was. I thought that, mental health is what happens in the mind, but actually, maybe not everyone agrees with this view, but I think the way we see it definitely at Sanctus, the company I work at, is that mental health is broader than that. It's, yes, it's what happens in your mind, but it's also what happens in your body, but it's also what happens in the interactions you have with others and the environment around you and your work and your purpose and all that kind of stuff. So there's so much to it. So you're right. Like, if the time you spend with friends and working on those relationships is you working on your mental health, and vice versa. It all interacts with each other. It's like a big sort of ecosystem. Um, which again, I didn't know that when I was at uni. So I thought had this stuff going on in my head, but I could not talk about that. I could just leave it in the head in like a little shoebox tucked away, and that wouldn't have any impact on anyone else or any other part of my life. But it does, right? Like, as I started to withdraw more, like, from myself, I withdrew from my friends and my social circles.
Mm.
So it was all linked. My own mental health was then impacting the relationships I had with my friends, and vice versa. Now, as I've done the work over the last few years and become more aware of my own mental health and develop better language around it and all that kind of stuff, I can be there more for my friends. Whether that's just being more present when we're out, or whether that's you know asking them the questions I wish I'd asked myself, or being there to support them. So yeah, as you say, it's all so linked.
And how has your kind of like connection with the present moment changed as you've kind of gone through your mental health journey?
Oh, this was like the deep one, the deep question. Um, I think I I'm not going to say like I'm always like super super zen and really present, and I don't know if you've read The Power of Now, but it's all like about being in the
Yeah.
moment. I'm not I'm not like that. Like, I wish I was. I wish I was up in like the Himalayas somewhere, like a retreat, just always zen. I'm not, and I don't know how realistic that is for anyone. Like, we get caught up in worries of the past or the future or whatever. But I think I'm definitely more accepting now of just like myself and life and where things are at and where they're heading. I think before, and we're sort of told to do this, but I get caught up in the future and the 5-year plans, the 10-year plans, the career plans. Have this, and this done by all these ages and all the rest of it. Beating yourself up if you haven't. I think now I I don't look too far ahead. Like, I don't plan too far ahead unless I have to, unless it's like a holiday for next year or something. I try to not plan too far ahead because, yeah, I just know that like life is fluid. So so is the way that I'm going to feel. And that affects, that's everything. That's your mood, your connection with other people, but what makes you happy, and your purpose. So, the plan I had for my life when I started uni completely has not gone to plan at all. So I think that's how I've started to live more in the present moment. Really, is just being a bit more comfortable with, I think, life being fluid, not trying to fit in certain boxes or tick certain boxes off by certain ages or milestones, and just being comfortable with that, sort of being comfortable with the journey. I've said this a few times in this podcast. That's not always easy to do. You do beat yourself up, and people do tell you should do certain things by certain ages, and you go on social media and you do get caught up in judging yourself, comparing yourself, and being hard on yourself. We all do that. I still do that, but I just come back to what we've talked about earlier, trying to see it, have the moment, and then step out of it, not judge myself, be comfortable with where things are heading.
It feels like that was quite similar to the point you made earlier when you were talking about your thoughts and looking at as if going down a like a river with rapids. Instead of being in the boat, you want to be sat on the sideline watching that. And it feels like that's where you went to with that point around the present moment. It's rather than often in anxious states, you're so attached to a certain outcome and you're constantly worrying about whether that outcome's going to be negative or you about every single little thing in between that. But it seems like you managed to reach more of a, I guess, like an acceptance and realization that you guess you can't control all of life, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen at you, and you can either kind of totally reject all those potential possibilities or try and enjoy it a bit more.
Yeah, I think that, like, the dream would probably be for anyone that none of this stuff impacts you. You're just like bulletproof. It just all kind of bounces off, and you're always zen. I just don't think that's practical. I think we're humans. We have natural emotions. We're gonna feel jealousy or anger or disappointment, guilt, sadness, whatever it is. I think I've just learned to not get stuck in those feelings as long. So I think the time that those feelings or thoughts might hang around has lessened over the years, and I still feel the feelings and I allow myself to feel them, but I feel like I'm much more easier now to move into a period of, or like a state of, acceptance, and being comfortable where I'm at and not letting myself get sucked into the rapids. So I think in my view, that's what people should aim for, and the best they can aim for. I don't again, it's not about never feeling bad emotions, quote unquote, or not thinking a certain way or feeling a certain way, because I think those things would always come up. There's a lot around social media, for example, comparing yourself on social media, and people saying, "Oh, just delete social media." That doesn't delete the emotions you feel. Like, you comparing yourself will not be gone once you get rid of social media. You'll just find other ways to compare yourself. You compare yourself to people on TV or out on the street. So it's not about always trying to attack, like, the symptom, which might be social media. It's about getting comfortable with what happens at the root, the emotion, getting comfortable with the emotion, aware of the emotion, and learning how you, when that comes up for you, how you respond to it, and how to work with it.
And that all comes back to that curiosity point, right? It's shifting your brain from rather like almost being defensive to being curious, and I think that's a really powerful shift if people can continue to make. I know there's a few things after this podcast that I'm gonna be more curious about. That's kind of I've kind of reflected on in my brain, even that's just popped up. Um, so yeah, thank you for that. Where I want to make sure I get onto is Sanctus and what your journey's been at the company, what the company do, and yeah, how that journey's been.
Yeah, so I work at a business called Sanctus. We are a mental health, wellbeing, personal, professional development company. So we have a team of 40 plus coaches, like fantastic coaches who work with businesses, the business we partner with, to provide their employees, and anyone at the business, from employees to leaders, a space where they can, a safe space where they can talk about themselves and work on themselves, whether that is challenges and issues and struggles, or if it is personal development and growth. So I think we're just really trying to give give people that space to be themselves, free, some of the things we talked about, free of this judgment, free of this shame, and free of all these kind of misconceptions around what you have to do or the way you have to be. Just let people come into the space with whatever's going on for them, good or bad, and just be real with that, be present with that, and then give people the space to work through that, and I think ultimately be the person they want to be. Comes back to the running analogy, like everyone's different, everyone has different goals and aspirations, so it's not about trying to make people be a certain way. It's about finding out what people want from their own lives and then helping them to get there. So that's what we do. And I think it's been really, really powerful being here for me. I think I was obviously very attracted to the brand and the company, having gone through my own journey, and particularly the product that we offered, that coaching space. I think knowing that therapy had been so powerful to me, and those conversations I had, I knew it was something that could do a lot of good and change a lot of lives. So I've been here for almost 5 years now. So quite a bit, kind of part of the furniture, definitely in startup world. But we've gone through a big journey. We raised our Series A VC backed money at the start of January. So we're just hoping to basically scale the mission and scale the product, and ultimately give people the space that we feel will help them live the lives they want to live.
Amazing. And one question I want to ask, just because I've seen this on LinkedIn in the kind of ether, but what do you say to a company that goes to you? Yeah, no, obviously our mental health of employees is really important, but we've got revenue targets to hit, and like this is like a nice to have. What do you say to those kind of companies?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are some companies that we don't work with because I think they clearly do not prioritize their people. They are
Mm,
profit over all else. But that any business really has profit, purpose, and people, right? Those three P's. That
hmm
there is no every business should be focused on all three of them. Yes, sometimes you maybe can't balance all three of them exactly at the same time, and some might have to take more priority than others at different periods. But you can't have profit without people. Maybe you can without purpose. Everyone's got a purpose. Really, every business has a purpose. So really, you can't have profit without purpose or people. So I think we just really clear with businesses. Particularly, there's plenty of stats and studies out there that have been done. A lot of good ones by McKinsey, showing the ROI of investing in your people. If you invest in your people and their learning and their development and their
hmm
growth and their well-being and their mental health, there are the figures and the evidence to back up the return that will have on your business. So I think the most commonly shared stat is from McKinsey. I think it was in 2019. They showed that for every pound that you invest in mental health and well-being, you'll see on average £5 returned back. I think for some businesses it was about 11, £12. So obviously a huge return on investment. So this was a much harder argument to sell a few years ago when I first got into the industry, and there wasn't these stats and studies out there. What it was more of a nice to have, and actually the businesses we worked with were the ones who just intuitively knew this was the right thing to do. We didn't work with a lot of business because a lot of
Yeah.
businesses just wanted the business case for it, which is fair enough. Of course, like they've got to look at the profit and the bottom line. There is a much bigger business case for it now, so I think we're always really clear on that. And like I said, some businesses just don't see that. Um, which I'm not going to judge them. Everyone believes in building a business in their own way. We just obviously believe very, very strongly that you to have a truly successful, happy business where people thrive, you need to be thinking about, yes, the profit, but also the people and the purpose. Um, and so for the businesses that see that, then we're always more than happy to go on the journey with them. But there's some businesses who maybe don't see that at the moment, and I hope that in the future it's not even a conversation around, oh, shouldn't we, like tick boxes, all the rest of it. I hope it's just such a core part of business strategy because it is so like blindingly obvious of the benefits and the ROI that is returned.
It just makes so much sense. I think what's going to happen is especially with this moment in time with the economy, it's the companies that are going to have people that are totally dedicated to the company, and they're only going to be dedicated to the company if that company is going to be looking after them. And it's going to be tough times. And I think it will just be so evident after we come out of this period that the companies that come out on top will have been the ones that were looking after their people, because then the people will look after them. And I think it's companies like Sanctus and other ones who are infiltrating mental health into the people policies of all these companies, that there's just going to be so many case studies of like the most successful businesses had mental health at the core of their like personal development. And then I think that will just be a knock-on effect, because you can't argue with the numbers. Even if you are not fully on board with mental health, if it's causing profits and performance to spike, then it's a pretty faultless argument, really.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it is a good point. Like there we are in a tough spot, like economy wise. There's obviously a lot going on around the world. Businesses are having to be more cautious at the moment. People are having to look at that profit. So maybe the profit part of the three Ps is becoming more of a priority. But you don't you don't only become a business that cares about mental health and well-being and development through spending money and through external services. Like, yes, that is one way to do it, and yes, if people come and buy Sanctus, fantastic. But I am aware of the current climate, and it's just not practical for businesses to be spending loads of money on all these different services, right? So that's fair. But you can still create a culture that supports people and helps them to thrive without spending a penny. Like, if you focus on things like making it a happier place for people to work, maybe it's flexible working, maybe it's unlimited holiday. If you look at your leaders leading with care, are they actually asking people how they are in one-to-ones? Are they prioritizing employee well-being just as much as targets? Do you have psychological safety in your business? Do people feel they can share their own opinions and say if something's not right and take risks without any repercussions? Do you have things like this in place? Because these are kind of the building blocks for mental health and well-being, from which you can build services on top of. So I think that's a really, really important point to get across, that I think sometimes businesses can maybe hide behind the shield of, oh, we don't have any money to spend, therefore we're not going to prioritize mental health, rather than maybe do some of the difficult things, which is leaders be vulnerable, giving space for employees to take time off for their mental health and all this kind of stuff. So really there is no place to hide when it comes to mental health and well-being. Like, there are things you can do from today, which could easily just be a leader in a one-to-one with an employee asking how their mental health and well-being is. Obviously, it's a whole different story of the cultures in place where that employee feels they can share. But yeah, there are things that businesses can do without spending money over the with the current economic climate, and still be a business that cares about mental health and well-being.
Yeah, 100%. Where I want to finish my the podcast is, I've seen through LinkedIn that you often stand up for what you think is right. You're like principled in the sense of, if you see something in the world that's going on that's impacting people negatively in terms of their mental health and general society, you stand up for what you believe is right. Why do you think that's an important thing to do?
Yeah, this is a good question. Yeah, I think I could definitely be quite outspoken and I think maybe quite bold with my views sometimes. I think I've just always had that passion and fire in me to do that, because it's a bit different now, but I think when I first started getting into the space, conversations around this were kept in the shadows. Like, they just weren't had, really. People didn't want to have it about themselves, their own mental health and well-being. But people weren't going to call out other malpractice or government policy or what companies were doing either, because it just wasn't, mental health wasn't really a thing. You just didn't really do that. You'd probably be criticized. I think I've just always had this kind of fire in me to want to give mental health a bit of a voice, like a real voice. And I think give people a voice, and say the things that I think I know people are feeling and thinking, and maybe aren't themselves able to say. They don't maybe have the confidence or the language, or they're worried, what people might think. I feel like I've wanted to sort of champion those people and champion that really. Obviously, I get some stick. Like I think that comes with the territory when you sort of have a strong belief or a strong opinion on something. But I get a lot, I get a lot of people who message me and or comment, thanks so much for sharing this or whatever, which I think that makes it all worth it really. Yeah.
Mm. Oh yeah, I just think it's so good that you do it because it holds space for people, to, as you said, either to comment in private or on the post about like, thank you for sharing this is important to do, but then it's also like the ripple effect. If they see something online, that then gives them kind of like ammunition to go have those conversations
Yeah.
offline with people, and then it's just an ongoing effect. And if we continue to do this about certain topics, it's like I was actually speaking to my dad about this because he's always someone to um, randomly get into conversations with people or to crack jokes or say something outrageous, and then other people will say something outrageous but in a more serious setting. If you are the first one to make the move in a group setting, maybe with your group of friends or with like a family member, if you are willing to share first or to at least just share something, that then gives them the confidence and space to go, oh, I'm actually feeling something too. And it's just that continued effort that we can really start to chip away at this. But it definitely all starts with like personal responsibility to feel like you can make a difference in yours and your friends and loved ones' lives.
100%. I've had so many friends come to me over the years with things that are going on, like for themselves, and that's not. I don't say that in a like a braggy look at me kind of way, but just more in a way of, you know when a group of lads get together, everyone rips each other and there's banter and all the rest of it. In those situations, particularly I think with lads, sometimes it can be hard to then be vulnerable and open up. But actually, I think obviously I've shared my story a lot online.
Mm.
That has given people the license to come and have conversations with me, and people have messaged me to say it's given them license to go and have conversations with their own friends or with therapists or whatever. So, as you say, I think you just
That's so good.
like that. That's probably the best like feedback I can get from anything I've ever had over the last few years. I just think you just remove the you. I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, really, because when I look back to my own story, what we're saying earlier is like, I didn't know how people were going to respond to me. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what people were going to say. I thought I was going to be criticised and judged and like ostracized. I think my hope is that by writing what I do, it just removes some of that fear for other people. Again, as as we said, the conversations will still probably be a bit difficult. You're still going to feel awkward and embarrassed and nervous and anxious, and you're probably going to stumble on your words and all the rest of it. But I just hope that I can show people that actually the outcome isn't as scary as they've probably built it up in their heads to be. That's not to say, everyone should start just coming out on LinkedIn and opening up about their mental health, or you should go and talk to absolutely everyone you meet about your mental health, because you've got to be smart with it. There are some people, I've had to learn this with my own kind of social circles over the years. There are some people I can have these conversations with, and there are some people who maybe it's not as helpful to have these conversations with. So that's for everyone to figure out kind of to themselves. But I think it's just about trying to show that, generally speaking, people are decent and nice, and the people in your social circles, if you've chosen the right friends, should want the best for you. So yeah, I think it's just trying to show people that it's these, like generally speaking, these things have a good and positive outcome.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I've enjoyed this conversation so much, and I think it's going to be really powerful for people who are going through really tough times. And just hearing like a person just speak about their mental health and the relationships they have and how they go about life in such a transparent way. I think it's thank you.
Thanks, Nick. I really appreciate the conversation, and I think if anyone wants to follow me on LinkedIn, I sort of share this stuff quite regularly on there, and happy to carry the conversation on there. But thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Never Fully Heard podcast. If you enjoyed it, please just share it with a friend. Would love to get this to as many people as possible. Thank you.